Maybe not. Recount. Card vote.
Well, we'll try again. Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 258. The noes to the left, 303.
The ayes to the right, 258. The noes to the left, 303. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Point of order, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, tonight's vote shows there is no majority for the Prime Minister's course of action in dealing with Brexit. Yet again, her government has been defeated. The government cannot keep on ignoring Parliament or ploughing on towards the 29th of March without a coherent plan. She cannot keep on just running down the clock and hoping that something will turn up that will save her day and save her face. So it is surprising that the Prime Minister is not even here to hear the result of this vote. So, Mr. Speaker, I was going to ask her to come to the dispatch box now and admit that her strategy has failed. And come forward, bring forward to the House a coherent plan that can deal with the stresses and anxieties that so many people all over this country are feeling, that can be brought to this House so that we can make some progress forward together to bring people together and prevent the catastrophe of a no-deal exit on the 29th of March. It's surprising, as I said, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is not here. Is there some way by which you could encourage her to return to the dispatch box and tell us what her plan actually is?
I'll come to the right honourable gentleman. It is not obligatory for the Prime Minister to be present on this occasion. Other representatives of the Treasury bench are here, and if the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union wants to take to the dispatch box, it's open to him to do so. But he's not obliged to do so, or if the Government Chief Whip wants to do so, chuntering from a sedentary position to no obvious benefit of purpose, wants to beetle along to the box, he's welcome to do so, but he has declined to do so. No, it's not incumbent upon them. They've been invited, but they're not obliged to do so. No. We come now to, I think, a point of order. The right honourable gentleman has made his own point in his own way with force and alacrity, and it's on the record for others to study. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a significant defeat for the government. This is a Burach. And at the end of the day, the Prime Minister should be here to accept her responsibilities on the back of this government defeat. Where is she? Mr. Speaker, I wonder, given the significance of this defeat tonight, what powers are open to us to force the government to bring forward its meaningful vote to next week? People in the United Kingdom want certainty. And finally, can I thank those members that had the courage to vote with us tonight to extend Article 50, members of all parties. But I would ask the question, where was the front bench of the Labour Party in extending Article 50?
People of the right honourable gentleman for his point of order, and in responding to the right honourable gentleman, I am seeking to be helpful to people interested in our proceedings who are not members of the House. And therefore I will, if I may, as I hope he would expect, treat of the factual inquiry that the leader of the Scottish National Party in this House put to me. What can be done, as he put it, to bring forward or to expedite the meaningful vote? The short answer to that is that it is not within the gift of the Chair to do so, and it is not for members of this House who are not part of the executive branch to do so. The meaningful vote is brought about as a result of statute and in accordance with statute, and the statute decrees that it be done by a minister. So that will happen when a minister is ready to bring forward that vote. However, the right honourable gentleman knows that there are at various times other opportunities for debates and votes, and the right honourable gentleman is not an innocent in these matters. He's well versed in parliamentary procedure, and he will know the opportunities open to him and to other colleagues across the House. And other members in other parts of the House will similarly be so conscious. We'll leave it there for now. Point of order, Mr. Tom Brake.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I suspect that if the Secretary of State, in opening this debate, had said that he was going to honour what Parliament voted for on 29th of January, in other words, ruling out no deal, he may well have won this vote this evening. But he didn't. So, Mr. Speaker, can you advise the House in what way can we as members of Parliament, who have already voted to rule out no deal, can ensure that the government listen to that and respond appropriately?
Well,
thanks, Jack.
A member from Ealing, who will be well known to colleagues, has just chuntered in the background that that's beyond even the Speaker's power. Well, it's certainly beyond the Speaker's power. What the right honourable gentleman has raised is an extremely important matter, but it is a matter of politics, and the politics will play out, and I use that term in a non-pejorative and neutral sense, in the days and weeks ahead, and we shall have to see where we get. And I think the right honourable gentleman was mainly concerned, I think I understand him correctly, he was mainly concerned to put his point on the record. And I think that there wasn't really a question mark there. But if there was, I'm not able to provide a definitive answer now, but we will return to these matters ere long. Yes, indeed. Point of order, Mr. Steve Baker.
Speaker, what we do know tonight is that there is a majority in this House for replacing the backstop with alternative arrangements, and that what rests upon that majority is what's known as the Malthouse Compromise. Is there any way to put on the record that the government should adopt that compromise and enjoy a majority for it?
The honourable gentleman is a county colleague of mine. That is a truly monstrous abuse of the point of order procedure, as the puckish grin on the face of the honourable gentleman demonstrates he is perfectly well aware. He has made his own point, he's found his own salvation. And the point was also made, of course, by colleagues of like mind to him in the course of the debate. But he has now given it a prominence with which I rather suspect he is satisfied. We'll leave it there for now, and I hope there are no further points of order. There's an Arsenal match on television very soon. But the Chair will always attend to his duties. You need be in no doubt on that score. We now come to motion number 3 on the order paper relating to the Children Act 1966 Amendment, Female Genital Mutilation Bill, Lords, business of the House. The whip to move. Thank you. The question is, as on the order paper, as most are there, say aye! Aye! Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order. We come now to the adjournment. The whip to move.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. And in the interests of the honourable member who has secured the adjournment, and I'm playing for time here. Yes, it is.
The Arsenal game starts in...
The Arsenal game starts in 3 minutes. I appeal to colleagues who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly so the adjournment debate can be properly conducted. The question is, this House do now adjourn. Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I also place on record my thanks to you for selecting this debate, which I am pleased to have secured for one simple reason: to give the government chance to do right by retired miners and their families in my constituency of Barnsley East and Coldfield communities across the country. I understand the significance of the Mineworkers pension scheme to other honourable members here today. My honourable friend, the member for Ashfield, who has brought so many of those involved together. The honourable member for Blanno Gwent, who led the Westminster Hall debate. The honourable members who are themselves former miners, and the many other Coldfield MPs who join me here today. This debate specifically seeks to address the injustices of the surplus sharing arrangement agreed in the Mineworkers pension scheme back in 1994. But I want to start by explaining just why it matters to so much to people in areas like Barnsley. Our community is one built on the coal industry. It once helped sustain some 30,000 jobs in the area, so many of those directly involved in mining itself, where the work was tough, difficult, dangerous. But aside from the economy that depended on it, the industry fostered an identity and sense of community spirit that lives on to this day. And in the same way that mining powered our community powered a nation. So I firmly believe that those who did so deserve nothing less than a fair arrangement that properly looks after them in later life. Unfortunately, the current scheme, agreed with the government upon privatisation of British coal in 1994, no longer does so. Back then, the government offered to act as a guarantor to the scheme, ensuring the pensions hard-earned by miners would not decrease in value. I will give way.
Can I thank my old friend for giving way? She's doing a great job here this evening. Would you agree with me that we're not disputing the importance of the government guarantee? This is giving retired miners like my uncles the peace of mind that their pensions are secure, and that's really important. The question is whether the government still needs to take a 50% share, more than £3 billion over 25 years, out of the scheme when they haven't made any direct payments into it. So it's finding the best way of giving former colliers and their families a fairer share of the pensions that's earned our focus tonight, which she's leading on.
The honourable member is absolutely right, and I want to make clear now, at this stage, my complaint is not with the deal at large. There are some concerns over the details of the bonus element of the pension, where disappointing investment returns could see bonuses lost over time and pensions worse off by around 30% in real terms, an issue I intend to press the Minister on later. But like the trustees, I acknowledge there are there are elements to this deal that are beneficial. I'll give way.
I would like to compliment my honourable friend on securing this really important debate. And just to echo her comments, the nation owes a debt of honour to the miners and the mining communities for providing the fuel that powered a nation. Many miners died prematurely, my own father in his 50s, my grandfather in his early 50s. What will happen to the surplus when the last of the miners and their beneficiaries have passed away? Where will that surplus go? And is that driving the government's actions?
He makes a really important point, and I'm sure the Minister has heard that and will respond in due course. So talking about the guarantee, it has provided a safeguard that has allowed them to follow higher risk and subsequently higher value investments that have proved lucrative. I'll happily give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way and really congratulate her on her fine speech. Just picking up on the point from the last intervention, isn't the very reason that there has to be action soon is that if there isn't, the mines themselves, whilst they're alive, will not get benefits from it?
The honourable gentleman is right, and it's an issue I'm going to come on to speak about in a moment, because the guarantee is not without its merits, but what this debate seeks to address is the specific surplus sharing arrangement which has seen government profit, as honourable members have said, so disproportionately at the expense of miners. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and congratulate her on securing this debate. Like her constituents in Barnsley, many in Doncaster share their same concerns. And does she not agree with me that when the scheme was first set up, the balance of risk was different. What we know now, all these years later, since 1994, does at the very least require a revision of looking at that balance of risk and being fairer in the future.
I thank the Honourable Lady and my Honourable Friend for her comments. I think she's absolutely right, and I'm going to come on to talk about that in a moment. And she talks about when the agreement was set up. Well, as admitted to me by the Minister in a written question asking what actuarial advice was taken, an agreement on which, and I quote, no such advice was obtained. Can we consider that for a moment, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this arrangement was put in place with no expert advice? It is little wonder that the initial prediction proved woefully inaccurate, and the surplus has been substantially more than anticipated. And it shows, because the sheer amount of money that has been taken out by the government since 1994 without returning a single penny is staggering. The Treasury has pocketed £4.4 billion since 1994.
Shameful.
I'll give way, yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I'm sure many ex-miners, for example, in Coventry, we used to have 2 collieries there. I'll be very grateful to her for securing this debate and trying to put some wrongs right. And I'm sure they'd appreciate that very, very much, because a lot of them suffer from silicosis and different diseases. So she's done a great service to the miners in doing this.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's absolutely right. There are a lot of former miners taking a very great interest in this debate. No, not less because the government have taken £617 million this year alone, on top of £102 million over the last 2 years. And as if that is not already enough, they plan to take another £427 million over the next 3 years. I will give way, yes.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I think she's making a really powerful speech. And does she agree with me that pensioner miners in areas such as mine in Durham should now be getting an enhanced set of benefits from this scheme, rather than the government creaming of this money? It's an absolute outrage.
I thank my honourable friend for her contribution. I know her constituency hosts the Durham Miners Gala, which celebrates the coalfield communities, and she's absolutely right. The money that the government have taken out, I repeat this, they have not contributed a single penny from their own funds. These are huge sums of money. I'll happily give way.
Thank you, I'm very grateful, and congratulate her very much on getting this debate. The miners have had to fight every inch of the way for pneumoconiosis compensation and everything. And in my constituency in the Cynon Valley, there is real anger and a feeling they've been cheated by the refusal to share out this surplus money in a fair and proper way.
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right, because these are huge sums of money involved, but actually for the individuals and families affected, it is striking how small the numbers involved are. I will happily give way.
I'm grateful to her and congratulate her on this speech. She's championing miners right across the UK, including in my seat in Ogmore. Would she also agree with me that we're running out of time? It's lots of widows who now receive the miners' pension. It's based on a reduction. So unless the government takes action now, we're going to be in a position where the money will just simply be taken up by the Treasury, and that can't be right for the thousands of miners left and their families.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because the average pension is just £84 a week, but that is a lot less for widows in receipt of the pension, and some are forced to get by on much less. I've read one, for instance, receiving as little as £59 a week after spending the best part of 3 decades down the pit. I'll happily give way.
I thank my friend for giving way, and of course the North Staffordshire coalfields are some of the most prosperous and efficient coalfields in the country. But would she agree with me that the money the government is taking into the Treasury, if it was spent on pensioners directly, the economic impact of those local communities that have been starved of funds since then would be immense, and in some cases transformative?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It's just totally unfair. How can it possibly be justified? £59 for a retired miner, £4.4 billion for the government. How is this fair? These are people who toiled for years in dangerous, gruelling conditions to help keep the lights on and our country running. I'll give way.
First of all, can I congratulate the Honourable Lady in bringing this forward, and the fact that so many people are here to register their support for what the Honourable Lady is saying. I'm here to do the same. The information that I have referred to the surplus sharing arrangement as a legalised but grossly immoral raid on the funds. Is it not time now for this government to right a wrong?
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and that is the purpose of this debate. It is time that action was taken. Because if we could consider what a difference it would make to pensioners' lives by diverting more money into their pockets rather than the coffers of the government. I will give way, yes.
I think my honourable friend is speaking very compellingly despite the many interruptions, and she certainly speaks to the sense of injustice in Doncaster North, in my constituency, around this issue. Has she had any discussions with the trustees of the Mineworkers pension scheme for their views on what they think a fair way forward would be?
I thank the honourable gentleman. I know he has championed this issue over many years, and I have indeed spoke with the trustees, and they are in agreement that we need to re-look at this.
Yes, they are. They absolutely are.
I will give way, yeah, but very briefly, I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, I just simply would like to say, first of all, I hope she gets a review out of this at the very least. Secondly, I have always supported the mine workers in relation to the closing of the pits by Michael Heseltine, which is a long time ago, but the bottom line is the miners deserve to be properly looked after.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his contribution. I'm pleased we've got cross-party support for this today. That is very, very welcome.
Because you're a socialist at heart, Bill. Cross-party within a party. Party within a party, that's three parties.
Because the risk undertaken by the government in guaranteeing the pensions no longer justifies the price paid by the miners for that assurance. The membership of the scheme alone has decreased substantially over the following decades since the deal was struck. In 2006, there was 280 members. Now there are 160,000. The government's financial risk in their role as guarantor of the pensions is in permanent decline. Yet essentially, they are still charging miners the same price as they did 25 years ago. I will give way, yeah.
Again, my honourable friend is completely right and making a really powerful case on behalf of mine workers all over the country. But just, you know, agree with me that we need to know whether the government is seeing the mine workers' pension as a source of income generation. Because if they are, that would be utterly morally wrong, given the contribution that the mine workers have made to our economy over so many years.
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. I'm sure the Minister has heard her question and will address it in good time. But never mind whether it is fair. From a financial perspective, the scheme fundamentally does not provide value for money for its members. I implore the Minister not to respond with platitudes about the benefits of the government's guarantee for the scheme. We know it has been beneficial, and I'm sure, as many a former miner from Barnsley will tell you, they know there is no such thing as a free lunch. I will give way, yes.
As a serving miner one time, with two broken legs, I just wonder sometimes when I see the newspaper about this Nigel Green and how, Sir Philip Green, sorry, for Philip Green, how he stole all the pensions. And here we are sitting here, and the government's stealing the pensions. They should be taking their nails off them as well.
I thank the honourable gentleman. As a former miner, he speaks with passion and has done over many decades, and he's absolutely right. It is blatantly unfair that those who have spent a life working literally at the coalface will be left to struggle in retirement, when the government can instead help near 160,000 former miners still affected. This is their money, and I appeal now to the Minister to do right by them. I will give way, yes.
I thank my honourable friend, and as the grandson of a coal miner myself, I know that the speech that she's making is so important for the communities that we represent. The Prime Minister, when she took over, stood on the steps of Downing Street and said there are burning injustices that are affecting our nation. Would she agree with me that this is one of those burning injustices? And if the promises the Prime Minister made are to mean anything at all, this wrong must be righted immediately.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It is totally unfair, and that's why I want to come on now to ask the Minister to dispel the concerns I briefly touched on earlier and protect the bonus element of the members' pensions, which will prevent real-term losses to pension value in times of poor investment return. And most importantly, is the Minister prepared to amend the surplus sharing scheme and meet with the Coalfield MPs, the scheme trustees, members and the NUM to discuss the revision, including consideration of the recent NUM Commission report, which suggested a 90-10 split in favour of the miners. Now, miners and their families in this country had their way of life ripped apart. They were branded the enemy within. Men were imprisoned because they were fighting for their jobs. Women ran soup kitchens because they were fighting for their community. Spirits were bruised but never broken. Tragically, too often, our miners were let down. The unfairness of this scheme must not, cannot be allowed to stand as the final chapter in that dismal history. Retired miners have waited long enough for what they have only ever wanted, their fair share.
Gloria De Piero. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for securing this debate, for an excellent speech, and for the opportunity to speak very briefly on an issue that I am extremely passionate about. Many of us are now familiar with the shocking headline figures behind the Mineworkers pension scheme story. The government has received nearly £4.5 billion from the MPS since 1994. It has never had to pay a penny into the scheme in its role as guarantor. That it is still pocketing in the region of £142 million a year. These figures don't even include any monies that it has received from the other coal pension scheme, the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, from which it has also made billions of pounds. Of course.
Would the Honourable Lady agree with me? But what is absolutely fundamental is that at the time of privatisation, any surplus was envisaged as a safety net, not as a cash cow for the government.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. My honourable friend absolutely hits the nail on the head.
Can I just confirm what my honourable friend Kifili said? I served on the bill that privatised the coal industry from the Labour side in 1994, and those guarantees were given at that stage.
He's absolutely right to make that point. What the headline figures that I've quoted don't tell us are the personal stories of hardship that our ex-miners and their widows are facing. The average weekly pension, not much more than £80 a week. It's hardly a sum that you could live a luxury lifestyle on. MPS pensioners rightly feel aggrieved at seeing the profits from their pension investments being used to boost the Treasury's coffers. An MPS pensioner from my constituency called into my office recently to show me his recent pension statement. He'd received the news that thanks to an increase of 3.4% to his guaranteed pension and a bonus of 4.2%, his pension was going up to the grand total of £74.71. That is not, of course.
Thank you so much for giving way. Would you agree and to remind the government that actually this is deferred income, that this has been earnt by miners, this isn't a gift that we are blessing on them, and it is their money, not anyone else's?
And that is why it is clear that there is this real need for the 50-50 surplus sharing arrangement that was put in place when the government became guarantor to be renegotiated across.
Can I thank both honourable members for such powerful speeches? Does she agree with me at a time when we had 40,000 excess deaths, the highest level we've seen for 40 years in this country, many of them old people, when we see pensioners' income under attack from higher inflation and the risks to their benefits, their free TV licences, that this is a wrong which must be righted by the Minister, and that these communities were devastated when their pits closed. So these people have lost income during their lifetime and they're now being denied it in retirement.
Absolutely. And the government has made far more money than was ever forecast, and it would be the decent and correct thing to do. To give it a cost.
Grateful to both my honourable friends for raising this matter. The calculation that was made in the privatisation in 1993-94 was on the basis there was still a lot of coal mines open at that time. Quite clearly that is not the case now, and it's quite clearly people are looking at this. It is a milk cow for government, and I don't know how many years the government are going to keep looking at this to try and get some sense from it. It is wholly wrong, and whilst we can quote about the increases in miners' pensions as well, it's quite often a lot of that has been lost because these people are means-tested benefit to start with, and we should recognise that.
My honourable friend raises a very good point from a wealth of experience of campaigning on this issue. So myself, Labour colleagues from other coalfield constituencies, the National Union of Mineworkers, other campaigners, and crucially, and I know that the Minister shook her head when my honourable friend raised it, but the trustees of the Mineworkers Pension Scheme, who I and other colleagues have met and who have told me to my face, this is not right. They know it's unfair. They know that the schemes need to be renegotiated, and approaches have been made to the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, but no meaningful efforts to engage have been made by the government. It has to change. It has to change quickly because the number of MPS pensioners is decreasing every year. Action needs to be taken now. So I ask the Minister to commit to giving ex-miners a fairer share of their pension from surpluses now?
Minister Claire Perry.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I sincerely congratulate the Honourable Lady on securing this debate and for a superb, passionate speech. It was brilliant to hear. Look, I need to declare a very strong interest in this matter, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is a reason that I take my stewardship of this scheme incredibly seriously, and that's because my mother-in-law is a beneficiary. She is a widow. Her husband, Bill O'Neill, who was a leading light in the Coke Workers Union, died very young as a result of his many years of service underground. Indeed, my husband turned down a job in the Kersley pit at the age of 16, but got into trouble at university for helping organise the blockade of the ports on the East Coast to stop the imports of Polish coal. So I won't take any lessons from anybody in this chamber as to the impact of this scheme, or indeed the feelings that have been raised over the years, which were so powerfully expressed by the Honourable Lady. And I do completely share her view that one of the things we always need to focus on is the sheer blood, sweat, tears and toil that went in to building our industrial revolution. And one of the rather marvellous bits about my current portfolio is the opportunity to perhaps repurpose some of that work through things like geothermal energy projects to basically create energy for the next generation based on the effort that went in. But what I wanted to do was pick up some of the points she raised about how the scheme is actually working, touch on some of the issues around the cash flow and set out, because I think it's a little unfair, the Honourable Lady saying there isn't engagement. There has been a lot of engagement on this process, and I continue to be interested in what the trustees are bringing forward, and indeed was discussing, if I can just make a bit of progress, discussing this with the Chancellor only today. Very briefly.
Can I thank the Minister for giving way? I understand that the Mineworkers Pensions trustees tried to meet the Department before Christmas to talk about the issue of the guarantee, but they still haven't heard from the Department about a meeting. So will the Minister pledge this evening to meet the Mineworkers Pensions trustees within the next fortnight?
I will. I met them, met the trustees, who I think have done an exceptionally good job with the scheme, and I'm going to come on to that last year. We have been in discussions with them about their proposals, and I'm shocked to hear that they were told that that meeting wasn't available. The meeting is available when they want it. But let me. Yes, I will.
To the Minister, can she inform the House whether there was a review process written into the 50-50 split when that decision was made? And if not, would it not now be the honourable thing for the Government to do to agree to that review, not least because it's been over 20 years, I believe, since the 50-50 split was decided?
A factual point I was going to come on to, but of course this split has been reviewed previously. It was last reviewed in 2002 by the then Labour government. The then Minister of State for Energy reviewed the split and said the trustees have been advised that the government does not feel it would be right to adjust the current 50-50 surplus sharing arrangements, referencing the fact in there that, of course, markets can go up and can go down. And in fact, in 2002, the scheme was in deficit, as it then was in 2008 and 2011. So the then Labour government made, if I just finish, made the decision then that, given the future unpredictability of the scheme, it would not be correct to review those pension surpluses. So it is not correct to say it has not been reviewed, and indeed the former Labour government made the decision not to change the surplus sharing arrangements.
She'll acknowledge that review was quite a few years ago now, and the scheme was in a very different state then. There were over 150,000 less miners and their widows now. The risk for the government is substantially less now than it was then.
Apples and pears.
So the point she makes is a valid one, but she's also, as she said, if the scheme had been reviewed at that point, then many more thousands of people would have been in receipt of a higher pension. And of course, the reason it wasn't, the decision I think was taken not to review, is because of the volatility that is inherent in the scheme for which government is a guarantor, but also because the proposal that somehow this is cash that then sits in the government's coffer. Government has no money of its own, so the money that has come into the scheme has been spent directly in many cases in the coalfield communities. We've spent over £1 billion. Well, hang on, we've spent over £1 billion of government money in the coalfield communities over the last 20 years. Since 2010, we've committed an additional £70 million. The point is, if the money comes into government, it's part of the government's general receipts and can then be recycled. It's helped to contribute to the benefits that many other pensioners have received. Now, I'm just let me let me just make some progress. So there is a question about where we...
Order. Some important questions have been asked, and I'm sure that people want to hear the answers from the Minister. Minister.
Mental fallacy, I'm afraid, at some of the arguments that are being made, which I suspect is why the previous Labour government also made the decision not to review the surplus sharing, which is that this money is coming into government and is then being spent to support pensioners in many ways, free prescriptions, free bus passes, etc., etc. So it is not correct to say that that money is sitting there. And no, I'm not giving way. There's some important questions have been answered. I think I was generous in allowing 2 speeches. I'm going to now, I'm not giving way. So let me turn to what is actually happening with the scheme. So as the Honourable Lady was quite right in saying, the scheme continues to function, the numbers are falling. It is rather unique. The only other scheme that's like it, I believe, is the same scheme that's been set up for rail workers, where the government essentially is the guarantor of this scheme, that fundamentally any liabilities that the scheme ever incurs comes back to government. And what I want to do is point out that because of that, the trustees, who do include ex-miners, have done an amazing investment job. So because of that guarantee, basically it's a government-backed scheme, returns from the scheme are at least 1/3 higher than they would otherwise have been. So it has generated a lot of value. And do you want to have answers, or do you want to keep asking questions? Because I love the Honourable Gentleman, I'll take a question.
So I thank the Minister for giving way. And listening to what she said, we on our side argue the government's had at least £3.5 billion in surplus in recent years. The Minister says the government has spent £1 billion in coalfield communities in the last 20 years. That feels to us on this side of the chamber that our communities have been shortchanged by £2 billion. So, given that the last review was nearly 20 years ago, why doesn't the Minister do the right thing now and agree to another review?
I'm sure the Honourable Gentleman will be the first to acknowledge, and in fact the Honourable Lady made the point, that sadly one of the results has been that many people who are in receipt of this pension scheme, including the Honourable Gentleman who was in his place, no longer live in those coalfield communities, but they have benefited as pensioners from many of the other pension benefits that income has gone towards providing. So can I just turn, and the Honourable Lady raised the question about what the trustees say. So I met and was incredibly impressed with the trustees, and I think relative to other schemes, the results they provided, and indeed the compassion and generosity with which they administer this scheme, is second to none, and we should absolutely pay tribute to them for that. And I do point out again that the returns from this government underwriting of the scheme are about 1/3 higher in real terms than they would have been. But I want to turn to what I think is something that has been suggested by the trustees. Who, when I met the trustees, and the Honourable Lady and I, maybe we should meet them together to have the same conversation. I'm very happy to do that. What they indicated to me was that they understood that actually changing the surplus sharing arrangements, as was considered by her last government and rejected, was actually not the biggest priority. The biggest priority was protecting the accrued bonuses and making sure that the scheme could proceed on that basis. They have come forward with some excellent proposals, and I commend them for that. And I had a short discussion this evening with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, about my interest and the Treasury's interest in properly reviewing those proposals and taking them forward. And I, as I've committed to the Honourable Gentleman, am very happy to have those conversations face to face. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I genuinely admire the speech the Honourable Lady made. It is brilliant to see her and so many colleagues standing up for a group of people who, many may argue, gave more than they received from the system. And as a family member, I am proud to acknowledge that and proud to stand up as the steward of the scheme and pledge to her that I will do my best to ensure going forward it continues to deliver. I do want to say that the proposals made by the trustees are excellent, albeit we need to look at the cash flow implications. We will continue to explore options, and I am very happy to do that on a cross-party basis with all honourable members and right honourable members who would be interested in doing so.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
The proceeding has ended.